Everybody knows Nina, and she's been working how long?
It's 1984, maybe.
On this, and so she promised me when she gets it all fixed up, we'll have a copy at the museum. So if she's going to explain a little bit more about it.
Well, just as some background, I'm not a member of the Historical Society. I have been in the past, a long time ago, but my sister and I got involved in 1984 when there was just a handful of the much older generation, about 5 or 6 women, and they were at that point, they had got the depot and had it installed up there by the ball diamond, and they desperately needed everything, and they just didn't have anybody to do anything, you know, and so we got involved at that time and got the depot. So it's through the depot really that stirred my interest in it, and we got a lot of volunteers and scraped it and painted it and did a lot of repair work on it and had a big art show, and 500 people came. It was wonderful. But then after that was over, they just locked it up, and nobody has any reason to care about it if there's no, you know, you can get in there. And it actually was a terrible place for it with the balls, you know, balls that hit and break the windows. But it was great that they saved it. But anyway, that was the beginning of my interest, and then through the years other people got involved, and there were times that there were other people that were, so I just sort of backed out. You know, my main focus was the depot, and but as it happens, I ended up, by a bit of serendipity, the depot's right, I live right behind it, so I see it probably more than anybody does, and without even, and since I bought this building 7 years ago, in 2012, and that sort of rekindled my interest in the history because I researched this building and got the history of my own building. And in reading things, you come across other bits of things that would go with other information you had. And the biggest help, I think, was that Linda was in the Historical Society then and had organized everything, and she and Jerry would sit there and read through all these old newspapers, and I would talk to her because I'm in and out of there, you know, often, and she would know when I was looking for something, and then they'd come across something and she'd show it to me, and it worked great. And then when there was something that was puzzling that we couldn't figure out, it helps to be able to talk to somebody about it and to figure it out, because when you start trying to research these things, the information is so sketchy. They never use addresses, they'll say this place was like 2 doors east of some other place. And so I was going to tell you as one of my first sources, and this is the year I really got involved, was 1984, and the Historical Society put out this little book, which is just, this was my Bible, and it's just packed with everything but every page, you know, and there was no index. So I just worn it out, you know, using it and looking up things. But these women, this little band of women got together and typed all this and produced this, and it's wonderful. And they have lists of businesses just that were in Greenup at different time periods, like 1894, or, you know, different time periods. But you just have the names, or you have what the businesses, we had so many groceries and so many doctors, but no idea of where they were. So it's just like trying to sort out a big jigsaw puzzle. But if you can just find the physical address of one building in a block, it's a great help, you know, and then you can begin to figure out the other places based on that. So it's a big challenge, isn't it, Linda?
Mm-hmm.
So this was a great source for me for information, and I used it when I produced a video in 1986, I think, called The Village Greenup Then and Now, and I had a big, expensive video camera. At that time, I don't think anybody else in town even had one, and it was just my own idea and my own project, and I walked all over town. I started at the cemetery and did a lot of taping there, and just, that's a great education right there, just to get familiarized with the names, the old names that you read in when you're working on something like this. And also I went and talked to a woman named Helen Hall, who was a native of Greenup, and her brother Dorsey Boots was the village clerk for years and years, and Helen taught business at the high school, and at one point she had actually had a business school that was upstairs in the bank building, like in the 30s maybe, 30s and 40s. And I went and talked to her, and she told me a lot of things that I'd never heard before. And so I just always took copious notes whenever I got a chance to talk to somebody like that that had that kind of information. And it's, through the years, there's been times still that I found it really valuable. But, and when I first started trying to do this history, I think there was one building on East Cumberland, which is Main Street over here, maybe the bait shop, I think, that had the number actually on it. And there was a number on another, probably still isn't. But anyway, and one building that the man owned it. I mean, they just had bought it and he was working on it. And I said, what is your address here? He didn't know. Because, you know, you just have a post office box and you go get your mail. Mm-hmm. So I badgered Jill, the village clerk, and she was really helpful. But I mean, I felt like I was really a pain to everybody. You know, if you're trying to pump them for information, but you have to have something official before you can get started on anything. And then I just sat down on a park bench over there with a pencil and paper, and I sketched the roof line of the buildings just to make myself a little thing. And as I found out numbers, I'd number them until I got, you know, familiar with it. So anyway, the object of all of this for me was that I wanted to compile all this information in a format where you could have the addresses like 100, 102, 104, 106, 108 all across the top, and down the side you would have the years. And I started with 1900 because we have a little bit of information prior to that, because we have some buildings that we know were there like in 1872, but basically the information was so sketchy and so hard to get pinned down that I just, for the official thing, I just sort of started with 1900 and went from there. I did do that. And the object was to be able to look down, like I could look down 100 East Cumberland and see who was there in 1900, and I could go down to 1920 and see who was there. Just, you know, you should be able to line up every page like that and see from start to finish who was there. And not only that, but you know who were their neighbors. And whenever I was trying to get information from somebody, even like in the 60s, it's amazing how little people remember where things were, you know, who was there. So whenever I talked to somebody and questioned them, well, who did you buy it from or rent it? You know, most of them are just rent it, but and who was on the either side of you when you were there. And I mean, often they don't even remember, but that was the process. And then when I bought this building. I thought, well, this would be perfect. I'll just set up a table in here and have all my stuff and sit there and be ready to receive information. I was so naive, like everybody's got to come in here and provide me with everything I need to know. Well, not. Plus, you can't get anybody's phone number now. Everybody's got a cell phone. But anyway, by making myself a big nuisance, I'm sure, but I managed to contact several people and did, you know, a lot of different people would come in and were helpful about, at least about their businesses, if it was the later ones. But as far as the historical stuff, that's all from the really old histories and the newspapers that comes. But anyway, I tried to do this with Bobby, because Bobby Goodman is the historian, the Greenup historian, and I don't purport to be. My part in this is just that I've compiled all this information that other people dredged up, but we've done quite a bit since too, haven't we, Linda? Since we got all those old newspapers, and so we've contributed, but I'm not trying to replace Bobby. I'm trying to preserve all the stuff that we have that we can't get anymore because the people that knew it are gone. And so I was concerned that I've gone from boxes and boxes of papers and little scraps with one little date and one little name on it, you know. And then I'll show you what I started with. And see how things progressed. This was my first. I had this 25-column book that I used to use for business. Well, figuring out all this, see, I didn't have my page wasn't big enough, so I added a column. So I mean, there's a lot to it. And this is not finished by any means, but I would like to present it to you and you get the idea. This is what I made my own notebook because there's none that size. I used the spine from something else and some poster board and covered it with old contact paper that I had in my house. But I'm calling it a chronological registry of Greenup, Illinois, downtown business district, 1900 to the present. And I've written in here, compiled by me and my phone number, and it says chronological registry of the Greenup Business District, 1900 to the present, listed in columns by street address. In this form, one may scan vertically through time to see various owners, occupants, and their neighbors. So that was the objective. And that I think I've accomplished, but there's still a lot of gaps. And but anyway, you get the idea. This is the format. And my granddaughter, who is scary sharp on the computer, gifted me with some of her time Sunday morning, and because I felt like there must be a way to get this on the computer so you can print it out where you can make multiple copies and it'll be more legible than just my handwriting. And printing. I started out just with pencil because I never would allow myself to enter anything in there until I felt confident that was accurate. Because if you can't trust the information you've got, you know, and so it takes a lot of double checking and to get to the point that you feel you're ready to put it down. So this one I did do in ink with a ruler, but you can't do these big X's on the computer, so I've still got to get that worked out. But anyway, I have East Cumberland, or Cumberland is Main Street. We have East Cumberland, West Cumberland, and then I had to include South Kentucky, which continues to be one of the main streets of interest in town, never mind the fact that nobody's here now in the whole street except in here in my husband's building, but more or less in the tax office. But right now it's empty. But anyway, there, and as I have this done, I have 40 years per page, and there's 3 pages for each. So it's going to be a lot. So that's why I thought if I could, but once I can understand the template that my granddaughter set up for me, I can sit there and type in the information. But still, even at that, it's going to take a while. But you can see, I mean, some are much more complete than others. This is 40 to 79. So, and thank goodness for the people that just got in one place and stayed there. Like, for instance, the Greenup Press, which is almost, you know, one of the longest ones. So that's what I was trying. I did have a few pictures, and I thought you might be interested in looking as I talked about this. Anybody nodding off yet? Well, I was going to give you a little history of this building, but maybe that's, we don't need all that. This is South Kentucky. And this picture I took with me to the town board, and I made copies and gave one to everybody because this picture is from 1993, so that's how long this had looked like this. But see, this was such an eyesore the way because this is basically, you know, the roof line, this is all one. But it was all chopped up, and I asked the board if they would paint that upper top, which they did, and if you notice, it sometimes looks so much better. And it was helpful to use information from the architectural assessment of Greenup that was done in 1992 by the Illinois State Historical Society. They sent a team of architecture students and people that do this at the time when people were trying to get places designated on the National Register of Historic Places, which this street is, and other areas of the Greenup. But in that report it said, when the upper floor space remains generally intact, these buildings continue to contribute to the district. The continuity of roof lines and storefront lines was used as a key factor in determining a building's ability to contribute architectural significance. And that, the board, you know, and they did that, and it looks so much better. But anyway, I wrote, see this, for example, like the number 2, the physical address of the building. This is my building, which is 113, and this is 11119, which is where the tax office is. 17 and 15 was where Grandma's place is vacated now, you know. And then 103 doesn't actually exist anymore because it was, that used to be Benson's, and the bank bought it. And, you know, enlarged the bank space.
Remember that a little bit.
And this picture, I think I've got.
Pick up truck.
Yeah. They were at that time. See, I wasn't in any historical society or anything, but I was always interested whenever something was being done around town to the old buildings. And the reason I took that picture, they were rebuilding the porch, which is on my husband's building next door. So it was built in 1993, and this one was built in 1992, the year before, and I've got a picture of that too that I just took. This picture is from a postcard, and it's showing the bank corner and then South Kentucky. There's 2 of this. That one's a little bit lighter and easy to see. I
I
don't
think
see
I
it.
gotta go.
You got one?
Almost like that.
Have you?
You may have seen it. But what is of interest, I think, to this one is,
Already 93.
1910.
It was on a postcard that was mailed in 1910, so we don't know.
It probably was taken early.
But I figure it was about that time that they took the picture. But in 1904, there was a catastrophic fire that destroyed the 3 buildings in between there. My building survived, and the last 2, like the bank and the oldest part of the whole building, which is right next to the bank, that's sort of that slate gray bluish color. Those survived, and at that time it was 4, I think 4 buildings in between were wood, and there was a drugstore, Garrison's drugstore, and a fire started in the back of the store somehow, and it just must have, the wind just swooped it up here. That was in February of 1904. And by September of 1904, that had all been rebuilt in brick with the buildings that are there now. Think about that. From February, everything was destroyed. September, it was all new. And the keystone is in the top of the thing, and it says on there September 1904. And we have the newspaper report of the fire itself and who lost what in it and all that. And there was damage to this building too. The law books and stuff, because there were lawyers and real estate people upstairs, and so that was and it was a fortunate thing in a way for James Henry Ward, who built this building, because he was a brick manufacturer, and he built this. He made the brick that he built this building with, and I think that probably was a pretty good selling point. I think he built it as a kind of a showplace because he had started manufacturing bricks in 1888, and he had advertised like 200,000 bricks for sale. And then the fire comes and wipes out all his neighbors, and I think he was quite a big, I guess like you'd say, a contractor, because I've found in our reading of old history that he had a job in Florida, of constructing some warehouses, and I've always wanted to go there and see if they're still standing. So he was gone for like months, you know, and there was a notice that he'd come back to town after. And I imagine they would, you know, he made the bricks, but they must have put them on the train to get them there. I don't know. Sure wasn't a meal on a weekend. But, and also, there's been some mention about what are some of the oldest surviving buildings in town. Well, this picture is where you see the porch. This is where Chances Are is right now. And over here in the corner, what you can see the end of this painting on the bricks, and it says paper, newspaper. This is what was for years and years D&D flower shop and then the barber shop. That's what this building is. And that building has been there. We know that the Greenup Mail newspaper was here from 1871 until 1874. So that's one of the oldest that's still, and it's still there. But that's an interesting picture, I think. I like them all. Oh, and one thing I was going to say about this one, that is hard to detect without a magnifying glass. But when I got that on the computer and looked at it,
Who ran that meat market?
The meat market, who?
Did you know who ran the meat market?
yes, I know, but I can't look it up right now. That's where it ended up. Hayden's were there later, but that's much earlier. I think that's about 1910 or so, this picture. In the corner down here, when you get that on the computer, you can see there is snow on the ground. So this is like Christmas season. And you see this, can you see this area where there's some greenery, like Christmas greenery. I don't know if they've used wire to make a framework or something. It's suspended from the building.
We saw this one long ago.
But
Yeah,
it
we
is
did.
suspended out there, and up here in front of the building, which you can hardly see without having on the computer, but you can see the greenery that I'm talking about. There are a pair of horses with a sleigh behind them. So I think that was sort of like a Christmas thing. You could go take a sleigh ride around town. Kind of neat. These pictures are amazing. And you know, most of them, you've seen them. They're tiny little black and white pictures, a lot of them, but when you get them blown up, it's fascinating what you can find. So, any questions or further discussion? This building was built by James Henry Ward in 1894.
Okay.
He was married to Mabel Talbot, who was one of the daughters of this Captain Talbot. He'd been in the Civil War, I guess. These people are all at the cemetery. If you go up there, you can check it out. But he built this building, and the first tenant that he had was a bank, and upstairs, as I said, were lawyers and real estate people. And the doors were in the center where that window is now, the narrow double doors that opened. And then by 1904, which is when that fire occurred, he owned the building again. I mean, he had this bank, the people that ran the bank had purchased the building from him, but apparently they weren't any better at their personal finances than they were at banking, because they defaulted, I guess, and James Henry Ward was the owner again, and it was a pool room downstairs by that time. That's just 10 years, 1894 to 1904, it was back in his ownership. So, and there were banks, so many banks, and apparently that was before there were the bank regulators and all the laws we have now, because if you had some extra cash, you could just tag up the sign and go into business. There's some great pictures of that, like what's now the coffee shop, or when it was, this guy was loaning, he was a notary, and he had the land to sell, and just like a huckster standing out there, these paunchy stomach and his hat on, and just waiting for the next mark to come along. It's funny. And then, for the age of this building, has had relatively few owners, which made it much easier to research. And from 1914 until 1956, this was the Greenup Post Office. And that's when
My brother worked here.
Sure, a lot of people remember that. Actually, I lived in the country, plus I was way young then, and so I don't know that I was ever in here more than once or twice, maybe, because we had rural delivery and they brought your mail there, and if you wanted a stamp, you put the pennies in a little cup in the mailbox. But anyway, it was the post office, and then it had various kind of short-term owners after that, but it ended up, this James Henry Ward's youngest son, Lyle Ward, ended up being the owner, and he's just collected the rent all those years, I guess, that it was the post office, because I've talked to people that knew him and said, oh, I don't know that he ever had a job, but he always had plenty, and he was real active in Boy Scouts, I've heard, and he lived till late 60s or something like that. Well, and then it was a tavern. Greenup was dry for a long period of time. And in June of 1969, they voted it wet. And Joe Neffley, who had the bar in here and probably had the first liquor license, I would say, because he opened this in September after they just had voted. And he had a drive-up window here in the alley and sign out there, and you know, it was, so that was till about 1990. And then, well, and then Dixie's brother, Mike Kuhn, bought it from Joe's estate. Joe had died. And Mike had toys, and antique toys. But anyway, when it'd been for sale for a while, and I just kept watching it, and it needed some help. And so I redid the whole upstairs, which had just sort of been ignored for a long time. People would just do something downstairs and pretend it wasn't up there, which you could do because this back wall was just a solid wall, and the entrance was a separate entrance outside, which is why through the years, a lot of people never even, you just wouldn't think of it, you know, out of sight, out of mind, because you had no business up there. And so, anyway, I knew that I wanted to be able to get up and down and enjoy it, so that was my priority, windows, and I bought 9 of the big windows, replaced all of them, but the rest is, and some of these the small windows had been paneled over, and I had that removed and exposed to try to bring it as much as possible back to the way it had been, so it was a lot of fun, and I've enjoyed it. But anyway, as I say, once I get this together, my intention is to turn it over to the Historic Society. I just wanted you to have an idea of where I'm trying to go with it, and I wanted other people to be able to understand it, because I told Linda, if I just leave everything in this state, nobody's going to understand it. And just like Bobby, I have used a lot of Bobby's old notebooks and things, and it's just teaches to try to plow through and figure out what was the significance of this, but there's really some wonderful information there if you can do it. So that's, unless somebody else has something particular to ask about. What did you ask about? Oh, who was the grocery in there?
The meat market.
Who was the meat market? That's what I was wondering.
So that would be West Cumberland, the north side, which would be this page. Is that right, Linda? No, I'm thinking that's not right. It's the south side. It's the south side.
Here.
It's the south side because the numbers are uneven numbers, supposed to be. Here we go. Well, Hayden's came in there in 1910. Before that, oh yeah, it was Wilson's Meat and Groceries was there in 1908. And you know,
is that right?
The Elston building, which we call it, where the chiropractor is, originally that was said Wilson up there instead of Elston like it does now, and that was this man.
Oh.
And that makes sense because Claude Elston was in there in like 1900. So he had, this Wilson had built that and then moved out just into a
My
small.
grandmother was a Wilson.
Oh.
And I thought that was.
Uh-huh. There were, you see those businesses a lot, like meat packing places, and but that's 1980. Every whole filled up. And surprisingly recent things you can't even pin down because, where is it? Oh, where the bake shop is. There's about 3 other things that I know were in there, like in the 60s, 70s, in that time period. I know they were in there, and everybody says they were in there, but nobody knows when or what order, and I'm just hesitant to even mention something if I can't at least specify who was there first. So I don't know, that somebody smarter than me will have to figure that out. It's just, it's a lot of information to compile. I'll just say that.
You did a wonderful job.
But see, like I say, you think, thank goodness for the people that just got one place and stay there, like this is the bank and you've got this nice continuous line. That just goes all the way through. But there are not very many of them. Not very many. And there's been, you know, like fire was a factor in a lot of, like who moved and who moved where and why did they move then. And then once you begin to see it, and it makes sense. So, and then you have things like I'm also trying to do then the 200 block, because I started out I was just going to do the 100 basically, this part with the preponderance of the businesses. But then I thought, well, if you have something you know about where these others were, you should try to get them down. And then you have things that you come to things like this. Ruffner's was on, well, I'm trying to explain about the library. Because, you know, the old library, it's such a critical part of downtown. But you got this big gap because it's actually, the front door is on Mill Street. So it's got a Mill Street address. So I can't, you know, so I just made myself a little note and said Carnegie Library has a Mill Street address, but that puts it where visually when you're walking along and trying to figure out where you can see that it's confusing to know how to treat things like that. It changed.
I mean, reading those little newspapers. Okay, so-and-so bought out so-and-so and they switched buildings and this was happening every month.
All the time. And no street addresses, nothing to tell. But like, for instance, the things that we've enjoyed and figured out by talking to each other. When they had this 1904 fire, one of the things that was burnt, which was 109, the other side of, it's where the tax preparation office is now.
Oh.
Right here on the other side of my husband's building. That was the post office. That was the post office. So in the 1904 fire, the post office was destroyed, all the mail and everything. And so we couldn't figure out where was the post office after that. Where did they put the post office? And this just happened this summer, wasn't it? Linda came across a little bit of news in one of the Greenup Press, I think, columns.
Toledo Democrat.
Toledo Democrat. Congratulating Postmaster Monahan, who had done such an excellent job of relocating the post office and getting everything in order so quickly. And smart and lucky for him, he owned, Monahan's was a big, old, long-established grocery and general store, which sat down here, like on this side of where the event center is now, that concrete slab that's there, that's where it was. So he was older, and I think maybe his store was closed. I'm not sure about that. But anyway, that was his building, and so they just moved whatever they could salvage, I guess, down there, and it was close enough that people were comfortable with this area, familiar with it, and to where to go get it. And then, when they got the new buildings built, they ended up, and the post office went right back in that building where it had been before the fire. And why they moved in here in 1914, I'm really not exactly clear, but I think it has to do with, probably with wild insurance. They were in insurance and real estate, and I think they probably just wanted the use of their own building because they were. His brother is the one, I think, he told me, that redid it and painted it and did all the gold work and everything, which is great, because I would never have accomplished that. And yes, it's peeling and it probably drives some people crazy.
No,
But you know, I've been in here for 7 years and I've never found the tiniest little flake on the floor. So I think it's very slow moving, and rust is just a natural thing. You can't stop it. So I figure it would look worse if I tried to get up there. Well, I couldn't. But if you tried to peel it off, or a buggy shop in here, which I guess was probably in the interim between the 1904 and 1914. But you know, it's sandstone, because I thought, gosh, and somebody said, well, they thought even the foot traffic could do that, of the years that it was the bank and all that, just foot traffic could do that. Because I thought it didn't, I would think it would take years for something like that, but it is sandstone, that part of it.
Okay.
And James Henry Ward, who built this building, his house is still surviving. You know, it's right there across from you, Lottie.
Oh, the brick house?
Yes.
I bought the apartment house, that's what it's called. Yeah.
That's his home. He built that for
It's a beautiful.
his wife and his family. And I don't know if he built his house before he built this, but his brick works was down there, right across
Okay.
from the house. I think it was probably where it used to be Zeiss and...
Where Elsie's house is?
Yes,
Yeah, that corner.
yes. It was 2 blocks. It says in one of the
I think I'll see it mentioned.
2 blocks. And there, that's amazing to think. This is William Wilde, who came from England. He was the first of the Wilds, you know, established the Wilde family. This office was in the townhouse. Imagine that now. It'd just be like if somebody selling insurance had their office in the municipal building. But his office was in there. Yeah, the people that took the time to do this, they need to be, they deserve our gratitude. I just wish they'd have used addresses.
Does it have on there who did that, or the name of the people that did it? Is it in there?
Oh, you mean who did this book?
Yeah.
Well, it was just whoever the membership was.
Okay. In the
Which
whole-
I
the
can
whole
pretty
thing.
well tell you who
Okay.
it was. Well,
Yeah.
Carrie Carson, she was a real history.
And Bobby.
Yes.
And Bobby, of course. And when my sister and I joined, because I know we went to a meeting at their Ellen Decker's house. Ellen Decker was a great historian. And it was Ellen Decker and Betty Bowman, Esteline Miller, Norris Berry.
Okay.
I mean, this was who it was. They were the last ones that personally knew a lot of these people that built these things. And so I'm glad I got involved at the time I did. And that other people did what they did too. I mean, every time just requires different talents, I guess, and people that have the time to do it. But trouble is, when you've got the time, you barely got your wits about you, so you can handle it. But I thought, I'm not leaving all this just in a box of papers, and so little by little I...
Doing a good job.
Yeah,
Very nice.
thank you for.
Thank you very much.
Well, I'm not...